Whether you like it or not, immersive audio seems to be here to stay, and that shift is firmly being led by Dolby Atmos. We've been on our own Atmos journey over the last couple of years with many ups and downs, and that journey even led us to developing our own range of monitors, the mums, as we wanted mastering grade monitoring all around the room. And we love it as a format, as do most other people we've met who are working in it. Most of the detractors we've encountered either have no real experience of it or think it's all a big tinfoil hat conspiracy and purely designed to make large corporations such as Apple, Dolby and Avid a load of money. And there may be some element of truth to that, but Dolby in particular have poured an enormous amount of investment into the format and so should be entitled to recoup and profit from that investment. Regular viewers will know I was very sceptical of Dolby Atmos for music when I first heard about it, but that's because I'm old enough to have seen many surround formats come and go, and I actually find it a distraction in cinemas rather than an enhancement, and wasn't at all sure of the benefits for music. And that was the first point of friction for me. Do I want guitars spinning around my head? Well, more often than not, no, but that's not what it's about. We haven't yet found a genre in which Dolby Atmos isn't appropriate if done well. From Greg Penny's incredible mix of Elton John's Rocket Man, which, whether you're a fan of the song or not, always triggers an emotion that the stereo mix just can't compete with, through dance and electronic music with things actually spinning around your head, to more natural genres such as jazz and orchestral recordings where it can just feel like you're right there in the room with the musicians. I'm sold on the format. It's wonderful and not only offers incredible creative possibilities, but has given me some of the most emotional and pleasurable listening experiences I've ever had, particularly with the sense of being in a space in which something was recorded and the incredible dynamic range the format allows you. But for a format like this to work, you need three things to form a perfect triangle: content created for it, a mechanism by which to distribute it, and the technology on which consumers can experience it. And that's been the downfall of many surround formats in the past. Most consumers don't have the ability or wish to place 12 speakers around their living room, and if they do, there's invariably the compromise of having to place the speakers in a far less than ideal position. One under the sofa, another one on top of a bookcase, one on the windowsill. We've all seen it, and the surround speakers for domestic use with formats traditionally found on DVD years ago tended to be small, tinny and a bit shit. But Dolby has the mechanism by which to distribute Atmos pretty much sorted, with Apple Music, Tidal, Amazon, Netflix and a whole host of streaming services all around the world having adopted the format, and many at no extra cost to the consumer. And the technology on which it's consumed is getting better all the time. The experience in Apple's ecosystem can be incredibly impressive when listening to a good spatial audio mix on their own AirPods, be it Pro or Max. The spatial audio that comes out of the built-in speakers on James's MacBook is nothing short of astonishing for the size of them, and there are a whole host of soundbars, smart speakers and other consumer systems that can portray a pretty good interpretation of a full Atmos mix in your kitchen or your living room. And then of course there's the whole home cinema market, which is surprisingly large, particularly in the States, with many houses featuring top spec fully calibrated multi-channel speaker systems, and the ever-growing number of vehicle manufacturers that are also adopting the format in their cars. And far from consumers having to make a conscious choice to invest in a ton of speakers, most are already experiencing it without even realizing. But what really separates this format from previous ones, and what really sold me on it, is that the metadata that determines the positional information is decoded on your device, and those algorithms are improving all the time. So what originally sounded like the stereo mix in a bin when using spatial audio with headphones on my iPhone only a couple of years ago now sounds pretty convincing, and all I've done is updated the OS, and with each update it gets better and better. But the one point of the triangle yet to fully sharpen its edges is content creation. Apple's controversial decision to only playlist tracks with spatial audio compatibility last year certainly gave the industry a kick, with most labels now seeing Dolby Atmos as a necessity rather than a luxury, but did result in a lot of frankly dogshit Atmos mixes being probably rushed out and probably mixed on headphones as opposed to a full multi-speaker Atmos system. And the main reason for this is the cost of entry versus lack of return. The format doesn't really cost the consumer anything extra, so there's no additional income from the labels, and you really need to be working on a properly calibrated speaker system of at least 7.1.4, so that's 7 speakers around the room, 1 sub and 4 speakers on the ceiling, in order to achieve the best and most reliable results and create a mix that is future-proof as the decoding algorithms for the consumer devices improve. And that's expensive. Now, you can do this on cheap speakers, and many are, creating their stereo mix on their regular high-end monitors and then stemming it out and using cheaper speakers placed around the room to judge positioning for the Atmos mix. And that's a perfectly viable approach. But there has been one major factor that has put a lot of home producers and smaller project studios, such as us, off of working in the format, and that's the ridiculous cost of getting audio from your DAW on your computer into your speakers, as well as the faff of expensive hardware needed to calibrate the room, or the software that you need to remember to bypass before you export your project, and the cost of even simple little things like plugging in headphones or turning the volume down you need to factor in can overcomplicate the system. The simplest system we could run here was a Sonifex 16-channel Dante to AES interface connected to our Mac using Dante Virtual Sound Card, and then sending AES outputs from that into a Trinov MC Pro to calibrate the room. It works. The kit totals nearly £15,000, and we still couldn't monitor on headphones without repatching to a separate traditional interface, or have any tactile control over the volume without spending another £1,000 on the hardware remote for the Trinov. And there have been a host of interfaces on the market touted as compatible for Atmos use, such as the Avid Matrix Studio, Apogee Symphony Mark II, and Antelope Galaxy 32 Synergy Core. That's a mouthful. But these are all costly and generally compromised afterthoughts added to existing products, rather than a bespoke standalone solution. What the world needs now is love. Sweet love. And an audio interface designed from the ground up for immersive audio that can easily and reliably connect to the host computer running the DAW, that gives us up to 16 outputs with the option to choose between mastering grade super transparent analog outputs or digital over AES and or Dante, the ability to easily check a binaural downmix on headphones, a microphone input on the front of the unit so we can plug in a measurement mic to calibrate the room when we need to, built-in room and speaker calibration that at a bare minimum enables us to time align the speakers and perform basic EQ functionality where needed that we don't have to remember to bypass on the host computer, the ability to bass manage and direct low end from high or surround speakers to a sub should we have to use smaller speakers with a limited low end response in smaller rooms, an easy to understand intuitive app that I can use and enables us to control the device from the computer hosting our DAW or an external device such as an iPad, and the last thing we need is a volume knob, and it needs to come in at around £2,500 in the UK. And towards the end of last year, a UK-based company you may have heard of called Audient approached us and said they may have been developing such a product, and they may have called it ORIA. And as we had an Atmos system but were still struggling with the overcomplicated mess of hardware required, asked if we wouldn't mind beta testing it for them. So we jumped at the chance and they sent us one. And full disclosure, we haven't been paid anything for either beta testing or doing this video. This isn't sponsored by Audient at all. We approached this very selfishly as we were looking for a solution that ticked all the boxes for us. So before James takes a dive into the functionality of the interface, spoiler alert, ORIA does tick all the boxes. This is quite possibly the most exciting piece of studio equipment I've ever placed in a rack. It does everything it needs to and more, and the team at Audient have listened to what we, the end users, want, and they have absolutely nailed it. I mean, this thing it's perfect. They have really, really genuinely nailed it.
ORIA is an extremely solid and well-built device in a sturdy 1U chassis with one of the most substantial front panels we've ever seen. This is a relatively deep unit, but it is not going to bend in a rack. On the rear of the unit, next to a standard IEC power connection, we find a slot for an optional Dante card, giving the capability for inputs and outputs to be easily integrated into an existing studio network, and a USB-C connection for simple direct-to-computer connections. BNC connectors are next for word clock sync within digital systems, and 2 ADAT inputs allow expansion with other devices. This is fantastic for using the ORIA as a hub for your studio, then patching in external preamps and inputs for recording a multi-channel session, for example. There are 2 ways to connect physical outputs to your speakers. Firstly, there are 16 AES connections on a DB25 connector. These AES connections are all outputs wired to the Tascam analog standard, so unlike a regular digital DB25 to AES cable, which features 4 male and 4 female XLRs, you'll need an 8 times male XLR cable to connect your ORIA to your speakers via AES. The routing of the AES connectors is, by default, patched to match the analog outputs, but can be reconfigured by the user via the ORIA app and stored in one of 32 user profiles. The analog outputs on balanced TRS jacks are all handily labelled with their intended speaker output, rather than numbered, so you don't have to remember which speaker numbered sockets are routed to. It's a simple detail, but it can be a lifesaver when you're patching things in. There are also 2 additional stereo outputs that allow you to plug in a further 2 pairs of stereo monitors and switch between them. Perfect if you're not using your existing stereo monitors as part of your surround system. On the front panel, we see a design language very similar to that found on the Evo interfaces, with combi inputs, multifunctional buttons, a screen, and a large control knob in the center section. It's a simple, intuitive, and effective design that even Mark can use without recourse to the manual. On the far left are a pair of combi inputs with XLR and instrument inputs with 2 of Audient's highly regarded console-grade mic preamps. As found on the existing Evo range, the multifunction knob controls the gain for each of these inputs by selecting input 1 or 2 on the input selection buttons on the far left. There's also a phantom 48-volt button and an instrument mode button for recording guitars. There's great user feedback on both the buttons themselves and also on the large LED screen whenever you're changing settings. Whenever an input is selected, the associated button lights up and the screen shows the necessary information, such as gain level. Likewise, when the phantom power button is activated, it lights up red and the screen confirms this action, and there are also safety measures in place carried over from the Evo line in which you cannot activate phantom power if the instrument input is active. The large stepped multifunction knob is the main control feature for navigating ORIA's features, and it feels great with nicely detented steps and a positive tactile feel to the push to select functionality. By default, it controls the monitoring volume over all 16 analog and AES surround outputs, but a simple press in switches between headphone 1, headphone 2, stereo outputs, circling back to surround. It will also control the level of whichever input has been selected, and pushing and holding reveals more control options, such as powering the unit off, controlling screen brightness, changing the purpose of the function button between polarity switch, dim, mono, and talkback, showing the status of the unit and sample rate selected, enabling configuration of audio over IP settings, and finally performing a factory reset. To the right of the control knob is the monitoring control section. The volume button immediately switches the main dial to operate on the main speaker monitoring system, with the HP1 and HP2 buttons switching control to the front situated headphone outputs. A very welcome addition we found to be missing from many other interfaces within the Dolby Atmos market, and essential for checking your binaural renders. The profile button switches between user-definable profiles with different speaker configurations. Thanks to this profile system, you don't need to mess around with irritating patching menus or rewiring everything unnecessarily. You can set these profiles up within the software, which we'll come to a bit later. The downmix button is a great feature integrated directly with the Dolby Atmos renderer, giving the capability to instantly switch from a full Atmos surround mix to a 5.1 downmix, stereo downmix, and more at the push of a button. Currently, this only works with the standalone Dolby Atmos renderer, but Audient are working hard to offer control with the built-in renderers that currently come bundled with most popular DAWs. Now let's take a look at the ORIA app, a comprehensive but easy to use software suite accompanying the hardware. Currently, the beta version only supports macOS, and we've been running it on Sonoma 14.2.1 with no issues, but Windows support will be available by the time the production models ship later in the year. The first thing we checked when connecting ORIA for the first time was whether or not we could actually listen to commercial Dolby Atmos mixes using Apple Music on our Mac Mini. We plugged ORIA in via USB, installed the software, and sure enough, once we had configured the outputs in Audio MIDI setup in macOS, 12 glorious surround meters lit up on ORIA, and you can now listen to commercially released Atmos mixes in anything up to a 714 configuration without the need for complicated third-party software, Dante, or an Apple TV connected to a consumer Atmos decoder. And this is a game changer. It just works. The app user interface itself is split into various sections and is incredibly intuitive and easy to use, with none of the overcomplicated workarounds we've seen on many afterthought interfaces from other manufacturers. The main central section of the ORIA provides a simple, easy to understand layout of your speaker configuration. At the top of the screen you'll find the volume control, a mute, dim and global delay function, perfect for lip syncing to video, as well as metering for up to 916 Dolby Atmos systems in both pre and post metering mode, and input and output selection. Below this is a visual representation of your setup. The listener is in the middle, signified by a white circle, with the front speakers grouped as dark purple, sides as blue and heights as light purple, and finally the LFE channel as green. At a very quick glance, it's easy to see what's configured to be playing audio, and when audio is sent to each speaker during playback, there's great visual feedback to confirm you're hearing what you should be. It's also super easy to individually mute speakers simply by clicking on them, or if you'd like to mute or solo groups of speakers based on position, you can use the menu in the bottom left, allowing mute and solo functionality for the verticals or height channels, sides, fronts, subs, and the stereo pair. Above the group section is the profile menu, where you can set up various configurations of speaker arrangement. For example, if you'd like to run 916 on one profile and 714 on another, you can switch quickly between the available setups at the click of a button. With the setup menu open on the right, you can click on a speaker in the main display to select it, then apply an EQ, delay, and also trim the volume of each channel to fine-tune your Dolby Atmos system to your room. You can also easily copy and paste settings from one speaker to another, and the crossover function allows you to divert low frequency information to a sub should you be using small speakers for heights or surround channels that aren't capable of reproducing lower frequencies. This is another key feature that can be impossible to configure using existing interfaces, and another well thought out and essential feature for many users. Audient are also including a Sonarworks measurement mic in the box with every ORIA, so with the multi-channel version of Sonarworks SoundID, you can calibrate your speakers and room in under an hour, then store the calibration profile in the unit itself. This will be a cost upgrade, but will come with a 60-day trial license. So that's a quick technical overview of the unit itself, but let's go back to Grumpy Mark and see if he's got anything to moan about, but it's news to me if he has.
So, to reiterate what I said earlier, Audient has done a fantastic job of creating an interface that just works for immersive audio. We are genuinely excited about this product, and it not only ticks all the boxes, but sounds fantastic. I really can't hear any difference when we switch from AES digital outputs to analog. The conversion is that good, and the console grade mic pre's and expandability over ADAT mean it really can be the centerpiece of your studio, not only for Atmos but also for tracking if you need to. And this has been the centerpiece of my mastering room since we've had it for stereo mastering as well as Atmos. It simply sounds like it isn't there, and has been rock solid in both performance and reliability. The only design choice I initially questioned was the decision to go with a non-standard AES output format. Traditionally, a DB25 loom for AES connectivity would have 4 stereo pairs of outputs on male XLRs and 4 stereo pairs of inputs on female XLRs, but I can see why Audient have done it the way they have, and it actually makes sense. It only requires 1 DB25 connector for 8 pairs of outputs rather than 2, as there are no AES inputs, and as the pinout is in the common Tascam analog format, pre-made looms are more widely available, far cheaper, and you only need 1 of them. A traditional AES loom for our Trinov cost around £100 in the UK, whereas the analog loom we bought to test the AES connectivity on ORIA was only 25, and despite not technically conforming to the 110 ohm AES standard, has given us no issues at all, as it's only a 1 metre loom that then connects to proper 110 ohm cable going to each speaker pair. The ability to repatch the AES outputs in the ORIA app is also a godsend, as it means you don't have to zigzag the cables across the room when pairing the speakers, going from left to right and left wide to right wide, left side to right side, rear, etc. You can just run cables down the length of the room and go from left to left wide to left side to left rear, and the same with the corresponding right hand channels, with centre and LFE sitting neatly together on another pair and height channels on another 2. This is yet another easily overlooked fine detail that can really make life difficult, but the guys at Audient have thought about it and they've given us the perfect solution. Pricing is very competitive, with the unit coming in at just over £2,500 in the UK, and actually something of a bargain when you add up the cost of everything you currently need to achieve what ORIA does, and so very well, and with this level of sound quality. And room calibration is essential unless you have a perfectly treated room with an equidistant speaker setup comprising identical speakers, and that's just not possible for most people. At the very least, you need to be able to time align the speakers to ensure the audio coming from each speaker reaches the listening position at the same time, and because of the necessary compromises in speaker placement for most people, you'll usually need to at least perform a modicum of EQ to match tonality across the system, especially if working with different models of speaker. The fact that you can do that manually using nothing more than the settings in the ORIA app is fantastic, and integration with Sonarworks SoundID is the icing on the cake, and all stored in the unit itself. We'll be filming a video on calibrating your system with ORIA very soon, but we'll sum up this video by simply saying this. If you have been sitting on the fence with Dolby Atmos and maybe have the budget for a speaker system but have been put off by the overpriced fudge of crap you need to get audio from your DAW to your speakers, and have been waiting for an affordable, high quality, reliable, simple to use, dedicated solution, this is it. This is the solution that studios like us, as well as home producers looking to move into immersive audio, have been crying out for. And it's from Audient, who have honestly been the loveliest team of people to work with. Hats off to you guys. We can't praise you highly enough. You've gone back to the drawing board and asked the end users what they need from ORIA, and you've got this so very, very right. It's an incredibly exciting product that deserves to do very well for you, and it looks really smart in the desk, and it feels great too. We love it. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and ding the ding dong. We'll be creating some more detailed content on ORIA in the very near future, so if you have any questions, then please leave them in the comments, drop us an email, or join us on Discord, and you'll see us in the next one.
They even named it after a popular biscuit. It doesn't taste of Oreos. Faff, plug this in, plug that in, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Can I listen to consumer music now? No, I bloody can't, because I need to spend another £5 on a consumer decoder that I've got to get a Dante output out of so as I can plug it into the other shit we've had to have that should all be a bloody cable. Then this thing comes along. Can I listen to commercial releases? Yes. How do I do that? I just plug it in and it works!